The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the city park. Marcus Johnson sat alone on a weathered wooden bench, his shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. In his hands was an old photograph, its edges frayed from years of handling. It showed a smiling woman with kind eyes and a little girl holding a bright yellow balloon. He traced their faces gently with his thumb before tucking the picture back into his coat pocket. Around him, life moved at its usual pace. Children laughed as they chased pigeons, joggers zipped by, and cars honked in the distance. But Marcus seemed untouched by it all, lost in memories that both comforted and haunted him. His clothes were worn, patched together over time, but there was something about the way he carried himself, a quiet dignity that made people glance twice without knowing why. Nearby, Officer Daniels strolled through the park, scanning the area for anything unusual. His gaze landed on Marcus, who had pulled out a small paper bag. Inside was a bottle of water, which Marcus sipped cautiously. To anyone watching closely, it was clear he wasn't drinking alcohol. The label on the bottle was visible enough. But Officer Daniels only saw what he expected to see, a homeless man with a paper bag. "Sir," Officer Daniels called out, his tone firm but not unkind. "What's in your hand?" Marcus looked up slowly, startled. "Just water," he replied calmly, holding up the bottle. "I'm not causing any trouble." Officer Daniels frowned. "You sure about that? Let me see." Without argument, Marcus handed over the bottle. Though it contained nothing more than plain water, the officer shook his head dismissively. "Public intoxication laws are pretty strict around here," he said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Sorry, buddy, but I've got to take you in." Marcus stiffened, confusion flickering across his face. "For drinking water?" "It's procedure," Officer Daniels replied curtly, securing the cuffs around Marcus's wrists. As Marcus stood, his mind raced. How had it come to this? Once he'd worn a uniform proudly, serving his country overseas. He'd received medals for bravery, faced danger head-on, and returned home hoping to build a better future. But when tragedy struck, losing his wife, to illness and his daughter in a car accident, he found himself drowning in grief. Unable to hold down a job or pay rent, he ended up on the streets living day by day. The walk to the patrol car felt endless. Passers-by stared, some with pity, others with indifference. One child tugged at her mother's sleeve, asking why the man was being taken away. Her mother shushed her quickly, averting her eyes. Inside the car, Marcus stared out the window, watching the world blur past. Despite everything, anger didn't rise within him. Instead, sadness settled deep in his chest. He thought about how far he'd fallen, not just from society's standards, but from the person he once dreamed of becoming. At the station, paperwork was filed, and Marcus was placed in a holding cell. As the hours dragged on, he couldn't shake the feeling that this arrest was somehow symbolic, a culmination of years of struggle, loss, and neglect. Yet even now, sitting on a cold metal bench in a dimly lit cell, Marcus held on to a sliver of hope. Hope that someone, somewhere, might still recognize the man beneath the tattered clothes and weary expression. Little did he know, his story was far from over, and soon, the entire courtroom would bear witness to the truth of who Marcus Johnson really was. The next morning, Marcus was led into a crowded courtroom. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile holding cell he'd spent the night in. He shuffled forward, his handcuffed hands resting lightly against his stomach as he walked. His worn shoes scuffed against the tiled floor, drawing curious glances from those already seated. Marcus felt out of place among the sharply dressed lawyers and neatly groomed spectators. His faded jacket hung loosely on his frame, and his unshaven face bore the marks of sleepless nights. Yet, there was something about him, an aura of quiet strength, that made people pause. Even the bailiff, who had seen countless defendants pass through these doors, gave Marcus a second look before directing him to stand at the defendant's table. The judge entered shortly after, her robes flowing behind her like a dark cloud. She adjusted her glasses and began reviewing the day's cases. When it came time for Marcus's hearing, the prosecutor stood up, ready to present the charges. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, flipping open a file folder. The defendant, Marcus Johnson, was arrested last evening for public intoxication. Officers observed him drinking from a suspicious container in a public park. Despite his claims otherwise, this behavior constitutes a violation of city ordinances. Marcus listened silently, his expression unreadable. He didn't argue or protest. Instead, he stared straight ahead, as though trying to distance himself from the proceedings unfolding around him. When it was his turn to speak, the judge turned toward him. Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to say in your defense? Her voice was calm but firm, carrying an authority that demanded respect. Marcus hesitated, then nodded slightly. Your Honor, he said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. I wasn't drinking alcohol. It was just water. I wasn't bothering anyone. I was sitting quietly on a bench minding my own business. His words hung in the air, simple, yet sincere. For a moment, the courtroom fell silent. Then the prosecutor interjected, pointing out that Marcus had no fixed address and suggesting this indicated a pattern of behavior warranting legal action. As the back and forth continued, Marcus's mind drifted elsewhere. He thought about the photograph tucked safely in his pocket, the faces of his wife and daughter smiling back at him. They were the reason he kept going, even when life seemed determined to knock him down. Just as the judge prepared to render her decision, she paused, glancing down at the paperwork in front of her. Something caught her eye, a name listed under military service in Marcus's background check. Wait a moment, she said, leaning forward slightly. Did you serve in the military, Mr. Johnson? Marcus blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, Your Honor, he replied softly. I served 2 tours overseas. The judge's brow furrowed as she studied the details more closely. Then, almost instinctively, she asked, What is your full name again? Marcus Elijah Johnson, he answered, his voice barely above a whisper. At the mention of his name, the judge froze. Her pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the desk. For several seconds, she simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she rose to her feet. The courtroom grew tense. Everyone watched, unsure what was happening. Was the judge angry? Had Marcus done something wrong? But then, in a move that stunned everyone present, the judge stepped down from her bench and approached Marcus directly. Without saying a word, she extended her hand. Confusion rippled through the room. Spectators exchanged bewildered glances. What could possibly be going on? One by one, others in the courtroom began to rise, not just the lawyers and clerks, but ordinary citizens who had come to observe the trial. Within moments, every person in the room was standing, their eyes fixed on Marcus. And as Marcus looked around, bewildered by the sudden display of respect, tears welled up in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as Marcus stood frozen, unsure how to react. His heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment, he felt like the world had tilted on its axis. Everyone was looking at him, standing for him, but why? What did they know that he didn't? The judge, still standing near Marcus, finally broke the silence. Mr. Johnson, she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, do you have any idea who I am? Marcus shook his head slowly, confusion etched across his face. No, ma'am, he replied. I'm sorry, but I don't. She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. My name is Judge Evelyn Carter, she began, her tone measured yet filled with reverence. 20 years ago, during your second tour of duty, my brother, Lieutenant Daniel Carter, was trapped behind enemy lines. He radioed for help, but no one could reach him. No one, except you. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Marcus's eyes widened as fragments of memory came rushing back. That mission, it had been one of the most dangerous of his career. A group of soldiers had been ambushed and communications were spotty at best. Against orders, Marcus had gone alone into hostile territory, risking his life to extract the stranded men. Among them was Lieutenant Carter. "I remember now," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the murmurs around him. "We got out just before reinforcements arrived. Your brother, he saved my life when we were pinned down. I owed it to him to bring him home." Judge Carter nodded, her composure wavering. "You did more than bring him home, Mr. Johnson. You gave him a chance to live, to see his children grow up, to walk his daughter down the aisle. Because of you, he lived another 15 years before passing away peacefully." Her words hung, heavy in the air, carrying weight far beyond the confines of the courtroom. Marcus lowered his gaze, overwhelmed by emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Pride, sorrow, regret, they all swirled together, threatening to overwhelm him. "And there's more," Judge Carter continued, turning to address the entire room. "This man isn't just a hero to my family. His unit received commendations for bravery under fire. They saved dozens of lives that day, including civilians caught in the crossfire. Yet here he stands today, homeless, forgotten, treated like a criminal for drinking water from a paper bag." Her voice grew stronger, firmer as she spoke. "How can we call ourselves a grateful nation if we let this happen? How can we honor those who've sacrificed so much while turning a blind eye to their struggles once they return home?" By now the courtroom was silent, every person hanging onto her every word. Some wiped away tears. Others clenched their fists, angry at the injustice. One of the spectators, a middle-aged man wearing a suit, stepped forward hesitantly. "Your Honor," he said, addressing the judge, "if I may, I served with Marcus overseas. We were in the same unit. I recognize him immediately." He turned to Marcus, extending his hand. "It's good to see you again, brother. I thought you'd disappeared after we lost touch." Marcus stared at the man, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Corporal Harris?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "The one and only," Harris confirmed with a small smile. "We heard rumors about what happened to you after the war, but none of us knew where you ended up. If we had—" Harris trailed off, shaking his head. The pain in his expression mirrored the feelings of everyone present. Judge Carter raised her hand, signaling for silence. She turned back to Marcus, her expression resolute. "Mr. Johnson, the charges against you are hereby dismissed. But this is not the end, it's only the beginning. You deserve better than this. We owe you better than this." As the judge returned to her bench, the courtroom erupted into applause. People clapped and cheered, moved by the revelation of Marcus's heroism and the judge's impassioned plea for justice. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. The applause in the courtroom slowly faded, but the energy remained electric. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, unsure how to process everything that had just unfolded. It was as though a dam had burst, releasing years of buried emotions and forgotten memories. For so long he'd carried the weight of his losses alone. His wife, his daughter, his sense of purpose. But now, surrounded by strangers who suddenly seemed like family, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Connection. Judge Carter addressed the room once more, her voice steady but filled with determination. "This case is dismissed," she announced firmly, slamming her gavel down for emphasis. "But let this moment serve as a reminder to all of us. We cannot allow veterans like Mr. Johnson to fall through the cracks. They gave everything for us. It's time we give back." Her words resonated deeply, prompting nods and murmurs of agreement throughout the courtroom. As Marcus turned to leave, Corporal Harris stepped forward again, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Marcus," Harris said earnestly, "you don't have to face this alone anymore. Let us help you get back on your feet." Before Marcus could respond, another voice joined the conversation, a young woman sitting in the front row. She stood up hesitantly, her hands clasped tightly together. "Excuse me?" she began, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Sarah Monroe. My dad served with you too. He always talked about your bravery. He passed away last year, but I know he'd want me to say thank you. And if there's anything I can do to help, please, let me know." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as he looked at her, The kindness in her voice reminded him of his late wife, whose gentle encouragement had kept him going during their toughest times. He nodded silently, unable to find the words to express his gratitude. As word spread about Marcus's story, others began approaching him, some offering jobs, others housing, and many simply wanting to shake his hand or share a kind word. Among them was an older man named Robert, a local business owner who introduced himself as a veteran advocate. "Marcus," Robert said warmly, "I run a foundation that helps veterans transition back into civilian life. Housing, employment, counseling. We provide whatever support they need. You're not alone in this fight anymore." For the first time in years, Marcus allowed himself to believe that change was possible. The weight on his shoulders didn't disappear entirely, but it felt lighter, as though someone had offered to carry part of the burden with him. Later that afternoon, Judge Carter invited Marcus to her chambers for a private conversation. Sitting across from her desk, Marcus felt a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "I meant what I said earlier," she told him, leaning forward slightly. "We owe you, and others like you, a debt we can never fully repay. But we can start by making sure you have the resources you need to rebuild your life." She handed him a folder containing information about veteran services, job training programs, and mental health support groups. "Take your time to look through this," she urged, "and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything. Consider me your ally in this journey." Marcus accepted the folder, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said softly. "I don't know what to say, except that I'll try to move forward." Judge Carter smiled warmly. "That's all anyone can ask of you, Marcus. One step at a time." As Marcus left the courthouse, the sun was setting, casting golden rays over the city streets. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. People passing by greeted him with smiles, some even stopping to thank him for his service. Though the road ahead would be challenging, Marcus knew he wasn't walking it alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, he dared to hope for healing, for belonging, and for a future worth fighting for. In the days following his release from court, Marcus found himself overwhelmed, not by hardship this time, but by kindness. The outpouring of support had been unexpected, and though it warmed his heart, it also left him feeling uncertain. Could he truly accept help after years of struggling alone? Did he deserve it? These questions lingered in his mind as he began navigating the resources offered to him. Robert, the veteran advocate, wasted no time setting things in motion. Within a week, Marcus was enrolled in counseling sessions tailored for veterans dealing with trauma and loss. At first, Marcus hesitated. He wasn't used to opening up about his pain, especially not to strangers. But during his second session, something shifted. As he spoke about losing his wife to illness and his daughter in the car accident, tears streamed down his face. For the first time, he allowed himself to grieve fully, to acknowledge the depth of his sorrow without judgment or shame. The counselor, a compassionate woman named Dr. Lisa Nguyen, gently encouraged him. "Grief isn't something you get over," she explained. "It's something you carry with you. But you don't have to carry it alone. Let these feelings guide you toward healing." Her words resonated deeply, giving Marcus permission to confront his emotions rather than bury them. Slowly, he began attending group therapy sessions where other veterans shared their stories. Hearing their struggles and triumphs inspired him to keep moving forward. Meanwhile, Robert helped Marcus secure temporary housing at a veterans shelter. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and filled with people who understood what he was going through. One evening, as Marcus sat in the common room flipping through an old magazine, he struck up a conversation with another resident, a young Marine named Tyler, who had recently returned from active duty. Tyler listened intently as Marcus recounted his experiences overseas. When Marcus finished, Tyler smiled gratefully. "I never met anyone like you before," he admitted. "You make me believe I can get through this too." Their friendship blossomed quickly, providing Marcus with a renewed sense of purpose. Helping Tyler navigate his own challenges reminded Marcus of the camaraderie he'd once cherished in the military. It felt good to be needed again. Around the same time, Sarah Monroe reached out to Marcus. True to her word, she wanted to help. She introduced him to a local nonprofit that assisted veterans in finding employment. After reviewing Marcus's skills and background, they connected him with a construction company looking for experienced workers. Though Marcus hadn't worked in years, the owner was eager to hire him, recognizing the value of his discipline and leadership abilities. On his first day at the job site, Marcus felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Wearing work boots and a hard hat, he joined a team repairing homes damaged by a recent storm. As he hammered nails and carried beams, he realized how much he'd missed having a sense of accomplishment. Each completed task felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming his life. Word of Marcus's story continued to spread throughout the community. One Saturday morning, as he arrived at the construction site, he was greeted by a group of volunteers holding signs that read, "Thank you, Marcus," and "We stand with our heroes." Touched beyond words, Marcus fought back tears as he thanked them. "I didn't do anything special," he insisted humbly, but one volunteer, a teenage boy clutching a homemade card, shook his head. "You did more than you know," he said, earnestly. "You showed us what courage looks like." That moment stayed with Marcus long after the day ended. For so many years he'd felt invisible, forgotten. Now he was beginning to see himself through others' eyes as someone worthy of respect, gratitude, and love. Though his journey was far from over, Marcus knew he was on the right path. Piece by piece, he was rebuilding not just his life, but his spirit. And for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of pride, not just in who he'd been, but in who he was becoming. As weeks turned into months, Marcus's life began to transform in ways he never imagined. The once broken pieces of his world were slowly coming together, forming a mosaic of hope and resilience. Yet what surprised him most was how his journey wasn't just changing him, it was inspiring others too. At the construction site, Marcus quickly earned the respect of his co-workers. His steady hands, sharp mind, and quiet leadership made him an invaluable part of the team. On one particularly grueling day, when heavy rain threatened to delay a critical project, Marcus stepped up with a solution. Drawing on his military experience, he organized the crew efficiently, ensuring they completed the work ahead of schedule despite the weather. "Marcus, you're a natural leader," the foreman said afterward, clapping him on the back. "We're lucky to have you here." Though Marcus brushed off the praise modestly, inside he felt a spark of pride. For so long he'd doubted his worth, but now, surrounded by people who valued his contributions, he began to see himself differently. He wasn't just a homeless veteran or a man burdened by loss. He was someone capable of making a difference. Beyond work, Marcus continued attending group therapy sessions, where he became a source of strength for others. Veterans newer to civilian, life often sought his advice, finding comfort in his calm demeanor and wisdom. One evening, after sharing his story about losing everything and learning to rebuild, a young soldier named Jamal approached him. "I don't know how you kept going," Jamal admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I feel like I'm drowning some days. How do you stay strong?" Marcus thought for a moment before replying. "It's not about being strong all the time," he said gently. "Sometimes it's about letting yourself fall apart and trusting that there are people who will help you stand back up. You don't have to carry this alone." Jamal nodded, visibly moved. From that day forward, he looked to Marcus as a mentor, someone who understood his pain yet still believed in brighter days ahead. Outside of his personal growth, Marcus also noticed the broader impact of his story. Judge Carter had shared his case with local media, sparking conversations about veteran homelessness and mental health. Community leaders organized fundraisers and awareness campaigns, urging citizens to support organizations dedicated to helping veterans. One event, titled "Honor Their Service," drew hundreds of attendees. Standing on stage alongside Judge Carter and Robert, Marcus addressed the crowd for the first time. His voice trembled at first, but as he spoke it grew stronger. "I never thought my story would matter to anyone," he confessed. But if sharing it can help even one person realize they're not alone, then it's worth telling. We owe it to each other, to our brothers and sisters in arms, to lift each other up. Together we can create change. The audience erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. Afterward, strangers lined up to shake Marcus's hand, thanking him for his courage and honesty. Among them was Sarah Monroe, who handed him a small envelope. Inside was a letter from her late father written years ago. To Marcus Johnson, it read, "You saved my life and I'll never forget it. Someday I hope the world sees the hero you truly are." Overwhelmed, Marcus hugged Sarah tightly, grateful for the reminder that his actions had touched lives far beyond what he'd ever known. Back at the Veterans Shelter, Marcus took on a new role as a peer counselor, mentoring residents and helping them navigate their own journeys. Watching them find hope and purpose filled him with a deep sense of fulfillment. Yet amidst all the progress, Marcus knew there was still work to be done, not just for himself, but for the countless others still struggling. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, he faced it with renewed determination. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't feel weighed down by his past. Instead, he saw it as a foundation, a reminder of how far he'd come and the strength he carried within. 1 year after the courtroom trial that changed everything, Marcus stood on a stage under a bright spotlight. The room was filled with veterans, community leaders, and families who had gathered for the grand opening of a new transitional housing facility named in his honor, the Marcus Johnson Veterans Center. As he looked out at the crowd, Marcus felt a wave of emotions: gratitude, pride, and humility all mingling together. He'd come so far from the man sitting alone on a park bench, clutching an old photograph and wondering if anyone would ever notice him again. Now, here he was, standing before hundreds of people who saw him not just as a veteran or a homeless man, but as a symbol of resilience and hope. Judge Carter took the microphone first, her voice warm and steady. "When I met Marcus Johnson, I didn't just see a defendant. I saw a hero whose story deserved to be told," she began. "His journey reminds us that no matter how far someone falls, they can rise again with love, support, and determination. This center exists because of him, and for everyone who needs a second chance." Applause erupted throughout the room, echoing off the walls. When it died down, Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. For a moment, he simply stood there, taking in the faces of those around him. Many were veterans like him, some still, carrying visible scars of war, others battling invisible wounds. Others were civilians who had chosen to stand beside them, offering their time, resources, and compassion. "Thank you," Marcus began, his voice soft but clear. "I never imagined I'd be here today, not because I didn't dream of a better life, but because I didn't think anyone cared enough to help me find it. But you proved me wrong." He paused, glancing at Judge Carter, Robert, Sarah, Tyler, and countless others who had become family over the past year. "This center isn't about me, it's about all of us. About what happens when we choose to see each other, really see each other instead of looking away. It's about believing in someone even when they've stopped believing in themselves." Tears glistened in his eyes as he continued. "I lost so much: my wife, my daughter, my sense of purpose. But along the way I found something too. I found a community that refused to give up on me. And now I want to pay that forward, to remind every veteran who walks through these doors that they're not alone, that their service matters, that their lives matter." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Then slowly people rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some shouted words of encouragement. Others simply stood in awe, moved by the depth of his sincerity. After the ceremony, Marcus wandered through the newly opened facility. Each room was clean and welcoming, decorated with care to create a sense of home. In one corner, a wall displayed photographs and stories of veterans who had overcome adversity, a reminder that healing was possible. As Marcus lingered near the entrance, a young boy approached him shyly, holding out a small American flag. "Are you the hero everyone's talking about?" the child asked innocently. Marcus knelt down to meet his gaze, smiling softly. "No, son," he replied. I'm just a man trying to do the right thing. But if my story helps you believe you can do the same, then maybe I am a little bit of a hero after all." The boy grinned and hugged him tightly before running back to his parents. Watching him go, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. His journey hadn't been easy, but it had led him here, to a place where he could make a difference not just for himself, but for others. In that moment, Marcus realized his legacy wasn't defined by medals or accolades. It was written in the lives he touched, the hearts he inspired, and the hope he helped ignite. And as long as there were people willing to stand together, that legacy would continue to grow.